Hello, everyone. It is the Redmen Originals podcast. I mean, technically, we've had a few of these recently where people are taking some well-earned time to themselves. Chris Pajak, family man extraordinaire, and Chloe Bloxham remains very much Miss Late Fitness Test at the moment. Well, a bit like Allister and the concussion protocols, not quite ready to resume full return to action for Chloe. But yeah, obviously she's on the mend, so hopefully she'll be back on the podcast very soon. In the meantime, though, we are very, very pleased to announce we have Steve Plunkett and Andy Bell joining Dan Club and myself for this one. Thank you so much, gents. Bet you thought we were going to be talking about the title procession when you booked in on this one. We will be discussing Liverpool's 3-2 defeat to Fulham. We will be discussing Slot's overall sort of strategy and how he's gotten us to this stage of the season, because I do think it warrants a little bit of discussion. But before I do, I want to draw everyone's attention to the biggest announcement we've ever been a part of. It is called the Red Weekender, and it is coming to the great city of Liverpool the final weekend of the season, the 23rd, 24th, 25th of May. We play our final game of the season on the 25th at Anfield. By all accounts, Liverpool will be lifting the trophy on the pitch that day, and it will be party time. But yeah, the party is going to be happening all weekend long. There are more details to follow on this. What you need to do right now is head to theredweekender.com. Register your details for ticket info. We will be announcing more this week, including what our plans are. And all I'll say, if you need to start getting your sort of ducks in a row on this, think Saturday is the most important day of all of this. I know I've just said that the trophy's getting lifted on Sunday and there's a parade on Monday. All I'm saying, Saturday. I've only just really spelled it out for all the people in the office. There's still a couple of little things to be confirmed, some T's to cross and I's to dot, but my good God, I'm not a man who's ever short of words, guys, but fuck me. What we've got planned is going to be incredible. Do not miss out whatever you do. So head to theredweekender.com for more information to register for ticket info, and hopefully we'll be able to announce a little bit more later on this week. So stay tuned to our socials. But yeah. Yes. Also, Steve wanted me to mention that there will be a prize draw on the buildup show on Friday for last month's signed thing that we give away to our Legend tier subscribers as well. So yeah, if you're missing out on who actually won that, don't worry, you haven't missed it. We just haven't had a chance to do it just yet. So that'll be happening in the pre-West Ham buildup show. Okay.
That was a deep breath before you did all that, mate.
I am flustered, because I can't.
Heavy stuff, though. It's heavy stuff.
But it kind of goes into why I want to have a wider conversation on where we're at. Liverpool are 11 points clear at the top of the league. That's one less than we were going into the last weekend of footy, of course. But I just need it all to be boxed so we can just focus on the good stuff. But in some regards, Steve, that was kind of the problem with the Fulham game, as I think we all just wanted it to be a game where Liverpool turn up, Liverpool take their 3 points in the sunshine, and we can all move on to the next. And Fulham, as it turns out, shockingly enough, weren't happy to facilitate that for us.
No, and the way they play seems to be a little bit of a problem for us, doesn't it? That's 4 points are taken off us this season. We want it to be a possession, our fans want it to be a possession, the rest of the world doesn't always see it that way, and they've got something to play for. They'll finish well in the league for their ambitions. They're a difficult side to play against, to keep you honest throughout the whole game, and you just can't have that many individual errors that will cost you at places like that, and that's how it came to pass.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it was so frustrating, and I think we all had that moment's relief where McAllister opens the score and you're thinking, yeah, go ahead. It was a little end-to-end in the opening stage. Everyone will be pleased to know, by the way, that I went back and rewatched the entire first half this morning, which you'd think would be like pulling teeth, and you'd be correct in thinking that. But for spells of that first half, it felt like it was well within our sphere of control and influence, and McAllister absolutely led the charge on that.
He did, yeah. It's a lovely goal, a lovely strike. I was really surprised to hear that's only his fourth Premier League goal of the season. I thought he was on maybe 7 or 8, and I know he's got a couple in Europe, but big goals at big times has been the theme with McAllister, and it's a lovely strike. The away end sound like they're having an absolutely glorious time in the sun down in London, and then what follows is just... Yeah, a bit of defensive panic, I think, instilled by Ibu, and then which settled into the rest of the back four, all of whom I think are at fault at some point for one of the goals. And Steve's right, when you give yourself such a mountain to climb, sometimes Lady Luck isn't quite on your side, as we see with the Harvey Elliott shot that hits the bar, and we end up coming away with nothing, unfortunately.
Just to kind of, we'll go through the game sort of chronologically, Dan, just to backtrack a touch. Start with Cody Gakpo. It was actually great to see him back, great to see him looking like Cody Gakpo, because he has not looked like Cody Gakpo in the few times we've seen him recently. So, we'll come on to talk about Diaz, but in isolation, I thought Gakpo was one of the bright spots, particularly in that early 15-20 minutes of the match.
Yeah, I'd probably go along with that. I was like you, I was just delighted to see him back playing from the start again, because I'm a huge Cody Gakpo fan, have been since you've had the football club, and obviously, the 2 appearances prior to international break, he looked so short of match sharpness, so short of match fitness, and nothing like his usual self, and then obviously goes away with the Dutch side and looked better. As a little bit, it was fine in the derby, just good to get him back out on the pitch, so it didn't shock me necessarily that he did start the match. But then Arne Slot came out post and basically said, maybe he did Luis Diaz a bit of a disservice by not including him, because he wasn't dropped necessarily. It was a sort of a straight swap rotation type thing, but off the back of Diaz's performance midweek, and then obviously the way it panned out, maybe we did miss of some of what he had to offer. But Jota was arguably undroppable because of winning the derby, so I'm not quite sure what he can do there. But yeah, I was pleased with Gakpo's general play in the early stages of that game. But again, when you look at what we missed maybe and what Diaz could have brought to the party, might have been a bit of hindsight involved, but maybe a slight error there.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, certainly. Andy, you touched upon it in the defence. Let's start with it, because there's good things to follow, least of all McAllister's goal. But Ibu Konate's little moments or two of madness inside the 18-yard box ends up really foreshadowing how the half goes, really, in that he just... I don't know what he's doing. Lingering on the ball, dallying, I think was the word I used in the watch along. Just like not decisive in his actions. He pushes it too far away from himself. Then it was very the worst of Simon Mignolet, what he did there.
Yeah.
And that they should have gone a goal up, and we'd have deserved it because of how crap Ibu Konate was in that moment.
Yeah, really strange from Konate. Somebody who's usually so reliable just had a mad 20-25 minutes. We've all done it in work sometimes. You just can't do anything right in a certain morning. And I've no idea really what it was. I think we're trying to play out from the back. I think there's a bit of a wider problem in terms of the front three, and we'll be going to talk about it. A bit of a lack of pace in behind, lack of ability to just knock it in behind and get the defence turned. I think everyone up front was looking a little bit slow, so that meant that Fulham were able to press a little bit more, play the game in a certain sort of rectangle of the pitch, and that meant there wasn't sort of space for our midfield, which makes it difficult for Konate to play out. But at the same time, you've got to get your head up, have a look, and if nothing's on, just don't dally on it in your own box. And that wasn't the only thing that he did, really. There were a couple of hairy moments. He had a couple of hairy moments in the week as well, so maybe he's just going through a little bit of bad form. But I think, like I said, that probably instills the panic which follows. Does Curtis Jones have that mad moment for the first goal? Not really a mad moment, but it comes off his knee. It's not a great clearance. Is that endemic of the panic that was instilled by Ibu? I'm not entirely sure, but it certainly was a bit of a car crash first half.
Well, it's one of them. You go 1-0 up after that stay, and you go, okay, fine. Well, it's a little silly moment, silly forgettable moment. And I would contend, because when I was talking about the game, I was looking at the momentum chart yesterday during the coverage, saying, well, Fulham had the best of it. Then we, just before our goal, and then just after our goal, we were great, and then it was all Fulham. Liverpool were all right, I actually think, having rewatched it, were actually generally in the game for all of the first half. But there was just that thing, once they get the equaliser, it's like 22 minutes, it's all looking fine. We're 1-0 up in the sunshine. This is great. We're going to get over the line. And there is an error. There are errors and there are moments of luck involved. So the first goal is the one that comes in. So I don't think there's much Curtis Jones can do, because I don't think he sees it until the last moment. And I've seen centre forwards miss ones that it's dropped in. World class centre forwards not do anything with that. I've seen great defenders not deal with those kind of things. Curtis Jones, it can happen. If that comes with any other part of his anatomy, that doesn't drop perfectly for Ryan Sessegnon to sweep in and finish it. The thing that actually concerns me is how easy they get into that situation. It goes all the way back, I think, to a free kick. They get up the pitch with relative ease. Is this the one where Sander Berge runs through the middle of the pitch and puts it wide to Pereira? There's something isn't quite right in how we set up, and that becomes the similar mistake that we kind of follow, where Liverpool are just not quite on it in situations where you need to be 100% switched on and on it.
I think our fullbacks are killing us at the moment, not having them available and the mistakes they're making as well. And you're right, it isn't something that Curtis can control. It comes off his thigh and the lad pounces on it and scores. The sort of panicking in amongst the centre-backs might be as a result of actually right now we don't know what our fullbacks are going to give us. The lack of a proper right-back, whether it be Bradley, even a Gomez or a Trent, we've built a system that everything comes out of the right back position, and that's dead on its feet at the moment. Because as good as Curtis is, he's not adept at playing in that role. So whether it's Bradley bombing on or Trent knocking balls all over the park or Gomez just being solid, you build a machine with the biggest cog in it being that one, and then take it away and replace it with something else that isn't going to be so effective, is it?
It's what, when we had the conversation a few weeks ago and I talked about the signing Isak and called it the Fernando Torres sort of problem, is when you've got one guy who's so good at doing something a specific way, you're dead right. And I get the notion of Curtis at right back, and I thought Curtis was fine at right back, by the way. I don't think I thought he performed admirably, and I definitely think he performed better than I believe Quansah would have done in that situation. But you are right, we are a team. So when people, this injuries thing has been like an ongoing banter situation all season long between City and Arsenal and Liverpool and blah, blah, blah. But when you take Alisson out of goal and you take Trent out of right back, actually how Liverpool play out from the back has to completely change.
Yeah, it does. And what was really interesting, at some point during that game, they decided to invert those two. So you'd have Konate step out into almost the right back position and Curtis would go into the centre. Strikes me as that damage limitation situation, which is a worry. And all the opposition do when they see that, a la Newcastle, is go, all right, your point before, let's push forward and step up. Fulham would have learnt a lot from the Newcastle game in the sense that without those bodies at right back, if you sit 10 yards further up the field, we don't have any ideas to get out.
Yeah.
So we can all sit here and the social media went ballistic, and I'm sure we'll get into this about a lack of creativity, a lack of anything from the front three. Well, they could have got deck chairs out and sat and watched because we weren't getting that ball to them. There's no coherent passages of play whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think we'll get onto it. This is one of Slot's biggest challenges in the next 18 months, is how he changes that dynamic.
But it's one of them things, to take this on, Andy, is Kelleher just kept kicking the ball long, and actually a fair few times it actually completed the pass pretty well, but it's never done with the same level of I think it's wonderful that he plays both footed. I think it's a really useful attribute that he's got, but when you're playing with your weaker foot, it's never got the direction that it's got when you're playing stronger. And similarly with the Trent thing, we're so trusting that these lads can just do something out of the ordinary to get us out of situations that we are a little more susceptible to being hemmed in them situations, and that is a big problem, because it's right, Steve's right, it's harder to dominate the ball when you're just battering it down the pitch and hoping it sticks to one of your forwards.
Yeah, I think usually if you've got Trent there, or even Bradley, who will hug the touchline and make the pitch really big and really wide, you can probably just clip it out to your right back. Maybe not quite as comfortable doing that with Curtis Jones. He's not really used to receiving the ball in that situation. You've got Robertson on the other side, who's obviously going through a little bit of sticky form. And then if you're Marco Silva, you're telling them stand on Van Dijk, make sure Van Dijk doesn't get the ball and is able to play out. And then when you've got Konate doing what Konate was doing, then the only option really is going long or sort of punching one into midfield, which is a risky tactic in itself. And as I was saying earlier, there were so many white bodies around any of our midfielders anytime they got the ball. I actually thought McAllister did really well on a couple of occasions in tight areas first half, but he shouldn't be put in those tight areas so much. And that was, I think, a little bit of a feeling tactically. So, with Keller, it did go long quite a lot. Jota's actually quite good at winning that foul where he backs in. He's won it quite a lot in recent weeks. And that's when people say, oh, well, all Jota is a finisher. I actually do think he has some more to his game, but then, it's... He gets the chance and he does miss it, unfortunately, and there is a conversation around him in the summer, I'm sure. But yeah, just with Keller, I think that the third goal is quite disappointing, isn't it? I don't know if we want to...
We'll definitely get to that one. But just as far as the first one goes, Dan, I mentioned that Sander Berge, you get away from Jota, and all of a sudden the midfield's not there. I've got no idea where Szoboszlai is. I didn't focus on that, but Gravenberch is effectively to his left, McAllister's to his right, and he runs through the middle of them, plays that wide, and then the cross comes in. Ibu, on first viewing, I just thought he's just gone over his head. You can jump for them, but actually Sky did it in analysis. He's looking at Curtis. He's not even looking at the play. So by the time he turns around, the ball is released. So his body shape's wrong. His attention's not where it needs to be. And I think that contributes towards him missing it, which in turn leads to the situation where it bounces off Curtis.
Yeah, definitely. And Curtis doesn't expect it. You both touched on it earlier on. I don't think there's a lot else he could have done. Obviously, it looks absolutely horrendous. And then when what goes on to follow in terms of just self-destruct across the back line for Liverpool, you can sort of identify that as another individual error, but I don't put too much blame at his door necessarily for it. But I think to the point when you mentioned Sander Berge, they're feeling the confidence and the ability, because Fulham clearly identified that there were spaces there was opportunities to get into a half and sort of box us in a little bit, do what we like to do to other teams really, and that comes from us just making mistakes across the pitch and not really looking assured and anywhere near with confidence we do in possession. And even that goal in itself, the fact in isolation, the fact that it falls to Sessegnon, he's the one on the move, he reacts first in the box, kind of tells you that we were a little bit tentative and they were flooding our final third.
Yeah, and in that, Van Dijk doesn't react to it either. And look, this way I think you have to give credit to Ryan Sessegnon, because it's great reactions from him. It's a really good finish as well. It's not a simple finish. I mean, God, the one Salah misses late on shows you that you can just, if you get one chance, one opportunity.
That was far easier Salah's as well, I would argue.
Quite arguably. It is possible to make a mess of those kind of things. So yeah. The thing that followed for me, Steve, that was really annoying was at this point, it's the amount of blind passes. And Szoboszlai's consistently guilty of this, I think. It's one of the things that Slot was quite clear in trying to drum out, I think, from the summer onwards, of stop playing chancer passes, little flicks around the corner. Make sure passes the guy you're passing it to. There's one where he's basically on the deep left midfield for us, facing our goal, and plays it in, blind into the middle of the pitch. McAllister had done one higher up the pitch. Robertson sort of ends up being a bit of that as well late on. But it becomes endemic that when you can't complete your passes, you can't control a football match, because you're giving that advantage to Fulham. They're at home, crowds are getting up, and we just can't hold on to the ball.
And that's the take the Klopp element out of the team and replace it with a Slot element within the team, because Klopp's big watchword was be brave, take chances, high risk, high reward. That will do Slot's head in, watching us give the ball like that, because he does speak to the players about where I need you to be if you lose the ball. Well, it's one thing losing the ball, it's an entirely different thing in your patterns of play going forward when you just give it away cheaply. And if you're turning balls into left and right back areas, they've got two athletic lads there who will take the... Calvin Bassey's a big strong boy, and he'd be like, I relish the fight with Mo Salah, and I will win that fight with Mo Salah, and he did. And if you turn the ball into a corner, he's going to get there first. And then suddenly they're quick, they're both at you very quickly, and then suddenly you're in trouble. So there's always a period in a game when you go 1-0 up and you've had a couple of scares, then you spend the next 10 minutes, they don't see the ball, and you knock the stuff out with them. And we're, like you say, we're trying Hollywood balls, turns around the corner, trying to be clever. There's one where the ball was absolutely fired at Gravenberch, and not only did he bring it under control, he laid a first-time ball off. And I was like, wow, that's absolutely insane to have that ability. But he's the only one on the pitch that can do that.
Well, yeah, but even then, I think Gravenberch looked so off it. The amount of times that something good he did came as a reaction to something bad he did. So like he miscontrolled it, and then he'd stick a leg out and just manage to get it back under control again. Or he would
he misplaced the pass and then win it back. Yeah, you're right.
Your example there that you started the conversation with is when we've all sat here in recent weeks, done a few of these with you guys. We've all been waxing lyrical about how good Szoboszlai is and how pivotal he is and all the good that happens. When he's off it, he's an absolute passenger, and they just run off your midfield all day long. So, as good as he is when he's on it, he causes us a load of problems when he's not, and I don't think he was on it at the weekend.
There's a huge, off the ball, on the ball disparity as well with Szoboszlai, I think, isn't there? Like the work he gets through and the shift he puts in, no one can really question that. No. But I think, as you said there, Steve, when he's not on his game 100% and the percentage passes aren't coming off of him, it's glaringly obvious.
I thought, in terms of his pressing, I thought he was actually quite poor yesterday. Not in terms of like
I'm joking more generally, sorry, yesterday.
But not in terms of his work rate. He's always going to put the effort in. But I thought his pressing was really hesitant. Not even necessarily from him, but we all know he's the one that leads the four that press. And there was just hesitancy was in them, and it wasn't necessarily Szoboszlai, but he needs to have everyone on it going at the same time, because when you play against a team as good as what Fulham are, and they are a very good team, there's a lot of good teams in that area of the league, from like 11th up to sort of 5th, where it starts to become the teams you expect to be good. If you're even a split second off in terms of going and putting the pressure on the ball, they will just play through you. I thought there were 3 or 4 times we had an opportunity to press, to go and win the ball back. And whether it was Szoboszlai or whether it was his teammates around him, it just wasn't.
But
quite,
you can't press when you give teams the opportunity to do what Newcastle and Fulham did, which was go shift the whole unit 10 yards further forward, because they're not getting out at right back. And if you go and try and press that and they bypass, you're absolutely dead. So you got to play like a keep them back type of tactic, as opposed to go and win the ball in high areas, because the lads behind are dealing with the opposition's threat.
Yeah.
So watch the 10 minutes of the Manchester derby yesterday, and City still had their centre-backs in United's half. You didn't see that at all.
We're not allowed to do it.
Can't do it, exactly. Because Fulham don't let you, because they recognise we can't get out.
But that was an in-game shift, sorry. I think that's them growing in confidence by seeing that we weren't anywhere near our usual selves.
That would have been what all training all week would have been about. Boys, sorry, but we're going to watch the League Cup final again. We're going to watch the Carabao Cup final for the 7th time this week, because that's what I want you to do. Yeah. And it's very noticeable when we get right back on the pitch, it all changes.
I think, just going back to the Szoboszlai point, as though I just agree. And I've seen people saying in the comments about, like, where he plays and what he does. And I want to have a little conversation, a wider conversation around that, perhaps in part 2. But the off the ball, on the ball stuff is fascinating, because I think... I said this last night, I want to see more on the ball stuff from him. Yeah. It's cool that he sets the press and he does all this extra stuff that most people don't see, and you've really got to delve into it, really got to focus on him to see what he delivers. And there'll always be footballers like that, but I find him fascinating, because I used to have this argument about, like, Lucas Leiva and Gini Wijnaldum. So people who watched it on the telly would forever hate on those players, and I'd be like, oh, I don't get it. I see them play, and I can see what they're doing. Szoboszlai, I don't read when he's not working for him. I just don't know what he is. Nope. He doesn't shoot. He doesn't try through balls. He doesn't use his physicality to drive. I mean, what Alexis McAllister did for his goal, that should be Dom Szoboszlai's bread and butter. Yeah, he's playing in the position. In fact, McAllister basically comes over to Szoboszlai's position to do it for him. Gets stuck in, shoulders someone off, and slams the ball into the back of the net. And that's the thing about Szoboszlai, isn't it, Dan? Is that when he's not playing well, you've really got to dig and look at what he is that he's bringing. And I thought his energy levels were absolutely fine. And that's the complicated conversation, because he was still running. He was tearing in on Bernd Leno, even when things look like, people might have been struggling. But I thought he had a shocker game, 79% pass completion, and I think he gave the ball away 8 times as well.
Yeah, it's just not good enough, those numbers aren't, and I think his performance overall wasn't either. But you're absolutely spot on, and you've seen it really in Harvey Elliott's cameo. He tried things, he's got that little bit of invention, he tries one little sort of deft pass to the back post, I think it quite comes off and then just goes out of play, but it's the bar, of course, as you mentioned earlier on. And what's so frustrating with Szoboszlai is we know he's capable of it. Obviously, we saw it in sort of the early throes of his career. We were making Steven Gerrard comparisons left, right and centre, weren't we? So we know he's got it in his locker. He does it every single time he goes away international duty, scores a free kick from miles away. The point remains, he's capable. He's got that sort of ability, but he seems so reluctant to use it. I'm not quite sure whether he's so focused on carrying out all the instructions that he's been given. He's playing with a lack of freedom. The shackles are on. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Is this like Jack Grealish shitus? You know, where you are a naturally wonderfully talented footballer, but when you are told to play within a particular system, some footballers overthink
Can't
it.
do both things. Maybe. I don't think it's quite the same level, because I think Jack Grealish was that maverick footballer, go out there and express yourself. I think Szoboszlai's got elements of that whilst also being able to carry out instructions and work for the team, and he can do a proper midfield shift, clearly. But you're right, just in terms of generally speaking, like without Trent, there's a real creative void in that side. And when you've got somebody who is sort of your allocated number 10 in Szoboszlai, you need a bit more playmaking from him, and we're just not seeing anything like it.
Yeah. It is mad because, like you've alluded to there, he has got this in him. Like, I remember when he broke through for Hungary. I think he scored the goal that qualified them for the Euros when he was 17. He was the youngest player to play for Hungary, or the youngest player to score for Hungary. He scored the goal that fired them to the Euros, and he wasn't this like 6'4"
running machine,
machine. He was this player. He was highly rated because of what he did on the ball. Same at Leipzig. He's out on the right wing, and he's known for his free kicks and his crossing and his technical ability. And then all of a sudden now he's we almost sometimes fall into the trap, or I do, of talking about him as if he's a bit like Momo Sissoko, just somebody who runs around everywhere.
That's the difference you said. The two players you mentioned before, Lucas Leiva was a DM by trade off to G. Wijnaldum, was that he played more advanced for Holland, of course, but was that functional midfielder who did a lot of the dirty work in there for us. We're talking about our tenure, and we're talking about the only time we really get sort of that deftness and that guile is when we take him off the pitch. That can't be right.
Yeah, no, that's the real conundrum, because also, let's look at Szoboszlai's numbers. Let's be fair to him. 7 goals and 5 assists in all comps this season. The only players who've got more, he's got the same amount of combined goals and assists as Jota and Darwin Núñez, and they're both centre forwards. And I know they've played combined about the same, just slightly more minutes. So it's the different circumstances, of course. But the only players who scored more goals than him are Jota, Diaz, Gakpo, and Salah. So he is getting he's getting more goals than anyone else is from midfield. But you're right, he's playing in the position to do that, and I do sometimes wonder. Yeah, he's a head scratcher.
We're not speaking out of turn either, I think it's fair to say, because this is something Arne Slot mentioned way back in like October, I want to say, possibly November time, about Szoboszlai's numbers needed to improve. Now, they may well have done that, but I don't think they've improved sufficiently enough to warrant us not having this conversation.
I think where we play him is a problem as well, because we've talked tactically about other teams dealing with Salah, and then you say, yeah, but then you're pushing Szoboszlai right up alongside Salah, 5 yards inside in half space between the full-back and the centre-back. Well, if you're not getting the ball up to the right side of the winger anyway, and he's just becoming someone who, like Salah and like Diaz at times, stands and watches what's going on in our half because we can't get the ball out to them.
Yeah.
There's a time to say to him, don't be an 8/10, be an 8. And sit in the hole. He might have helped with our midfield. I had the wherewithal to pull him back and sit him in there for half an hour.
Szoboszlai plays best, and Liverpool play best with Szoboszlai when he is that bridgehead between defence and attack. And that is to say, when you're getting out down the right-hand side, kick it to Szoboszlai. He doesn't need to take 2 touches. Like Harvey Elliott, this is where Harvey Elliott does it better. Just passes it, and what's his next move? Move it on. And then get on your bike and get forward with it. I love Szoboszlai as a wall pass in the middle of the pitch. It doesn't half facilitate us getting up the pitch, but when it's not working, he ends up a bit on Salah's toes, not quite sure where to go, hasn't maybe got the clearness of space for the shot, doesn't make runs in behind, because he's surely got a licence to do a bit more of that. I mean, Curtis got up, I know, from right back, so we kind of expected to. Gravenberch actually got a bit further up at times during that game. Szoboszlai should be making those cute little runs over the top and seeing if someone can pick him out, if he's not going to pick someone out himself. But yeah, I don't want to go over the top on it, because I think he's had a pretty decent season all told, but he is a little bit of a source of frustration. I can understand. I thought he deserved to be taken off the pitch.
That's sort of the thing, isn't it, Paul, in terms of a wider question around our squad, and the fact that Arne Slot just doesn't quite, for whatever reason, trust Harvey Elliott to come in and start a game like that. Szoboszlai, you're right, for the most of this season he has been brilliant, but he is going to have his times where he falls off, or maybe he's a little bit leggy. Same with Gravenberch, same with McAllister. We haven't had anyone there, maybe apart from Curtis Jones in the midfield, who he's hung his hat on to come in and trust. And I think there needs to be some difficult conversations, not necessarily in terms of my opinion. Like, I don't want to see Harvey Elliott go. I think he's a great player, but if Arne can't trust him to throw him in when Szoboszlai's leggy and out of form, then what's the point?
Absolutely. Look, let's get back to the goals and stop talking around them. Second goal is an absolute Robbo disaster class. I mean, it was quite funny because we did the watch along without obviously the podcast commentary, and then watched it back this morning. I'm watching Jamie Carragher's train of thought exposed as he goes on, rewatching it to realise Robertson's just kicked it straight to them. Then he's ran back in to sort it out, headed it straight back to them again, and then in trying to block the shot, deflects it past Kelleher. I think I said yesterday, Steve, if this had been in October, I'd have been tipping the desk over. Robbo, in some regards, is a little lucky that this is happening now, and not that he's had a great season and he's made too many mistakes throughout the season, but I could almost laugh at how ridiculous it was. It was on the borderline of like a Charlie Chaplin sketch for him trying to get himself out of trouble and only getting himself into more trouble.
Yeah, lots been said about his form and what we do going forward, and I don't think that moment sort of personifies, shows and highlights his season as such. That's a total mental brain fart moment, isn't it? Where you absolutely got no idea what you're doing. He opens up his body and shanks the ball straight into the number 9. Ridiculous. And then sort of, like you say, this is really good analogy, Charlie Chaplin saying it's mental to watch. It's absolutely ridiculous. You may watch football for another 20, 30 years, you won't see that again. It's absolutely bizarre. And unfortunately, he's a guy under quite a bit of pressure at the moment from his own fans.
Yeah.
And
I think he's dug in brilliantly over the last few weeks. Again, I think some people have been much more critical than I felt like being, to be honest, because I think the experience he's bringing, the fight determination, he's brought leadership to the pitch, and I think that's an experience. That's why he's playing ahead of Tsimikas for me. But if you are in the camp that Robertson's coming toward the end, that goal in particular is not turning your head in any way, shape, or form. That's feathering your nest as far as that opinion goes. I felt sorry for him because anyone can play a bad pass. The way I'm just about laughing.
Yeah, I'm not in the pile on Robertson camp.
No,
I think
if you are, that helps.
But yeah, but I'm starting to understand why certain people are. That performance yesterday generally is one that raises eyebrows, and you go, "Hang on a minute, that we might have a problem there." Not one where you go, "Right, you go, Summer, see you later," because of the two that we've got in the club. Tsimikas is more likely to move because, for exactly what you've just said, he's part of the lead group, and you need the lead group because we're going to be bringing new players potentially into the squad. They'll need to understand what we do. I see him going forward as almost like another James Milner character, where he understands what we do and why we do it and can share that with other people. But I do now see a need for him to have less minutes than he's getting, because it's not. We've run the legs off the guy. Yeah, absolutely run the legs off the guy's shot. So
at this point, Andy, our passing and pressing completely falls off a cliff, and I think there is I wonder whether this is the psychological side of things. I think you can measure physical fatigue far easier than you can measure mental fatigue, and I don't know whether the psychology is so hard to get our heads around here, because ultimately we're not elite sportsmen. It's very difficult to get your head into the headspace of an elite sports person, therefore. But in my thinking, you just want the 3 points because you're on the way to winning the league title. You know Arsenal have dropped, so a win here is almost makes, it's getting into academic sort of territory here. You get the goal, cool, this is it. It's all going our way. 1-1's fine because it's just one goal away from, you still got your 3 points. We can sort that out. All of a sudden you're losing, and it felt like the heads went collectively of the team a little bit there, of like, oh fuck, we're gonna have to actually really work for this. And this for me is where it started to feel like the season after the quadruple challenging season, whereas I'm looking round and I'm seeing Szoboszlai and I'm seeing all running around. They're not like hands on hips taking big lungfuls of breath because they're knackered, and they're not yawning away because they look knackered. But they look shot.
Yeah.
And that really reminded me of that time where no one could put their finger on it, but there was something there that was just off about the team from then to the end of the half.
Yeah, you mentioned the season after the quadruple challenge, and I think that it's that for me, and it's also actually quite similar to the when the league started back after COVID.
Yes.
We looked shot, same as at the end of last season, and there is a little bit of a theme with these players of legs falling off around this time. We all sort of not blamed Jurgen, but we all appreciated that Jurgen put so much into every training session, and it's all about, giving 100% every single week, and we're challenging against this juggernaut of a City team, so we need to, almost go again at 100% every single time. There was no conserving energy, and we thought this season with Arne Slot it would be a little bit different, and it has been different from an injury point of view. Mm-hmm. But actually, from a legs falling off around April point of view, it's been pretty much the same. And I don't know if that's a thing about this group of players, or Arne Slot is still configuring this league and English football, and obviously he's been in the Eredivisie, which is only 18 teams I think, and no League Cup. So there's all sorts of factors which come into it, but there's no doubt about it. That is what's happening at the minute. That's what's been happening in the last couple of weeks, and it's not only physical tiredness, it's when your legs go, your head goes as well. Since when did Andy Robertson make such silly mistakes? He was one of the most reliable defenders at his peak under Jurgen, really sensible in his build-up, a leader, sensible in everything that he did, but his legs are gone and his head went, and 3 sort of really poor errors. But I think that's just definitely something we have to look at this summer. Who can we trust? Why can't we throw an Endo in there? Why can't we throw an Elliott in there? Is it because we don't trust them? If so, difficult conversation about them, and go forward and make sure this doesn't happen next year. Because if Arsenal or City were a little bit closer, it would be very much squeaky bum time the way we're playing.
Yeah, the third goal, the killer, really, Dan. Muniz. It comes again from an all too easy run from Iwobi down the left wing. He gets a shot away. It's a fairly solid save from Queeve Callagher, goes out for the corner, and then it just goes past, just not clearing our lines. It's a mad moment where it ends up lumped up in the air. Veg should deal with it more. There isn't one of those wonderful, I can't be arsed going into the refereeing, but it's a bigger push on Virgil from Muniz than Gakpo then doesn't get penalised for 2 minutes later down the other end of the pitch. But the touch from Muniz is phenomenal. I think the goalkeeper then should be saving it. It's a good goal from a centre forward's perspective, but from Liverpool, it's just it's one of those where you're just going, lads, what are you doing?
Yeah, another wholly preventable goal, really, to be honest. And yeah, you're right. More errors, more question marks around some of the decision making that led up to it. And for me, Virgil, I agree with the point on the Gakpo one at the other end, but for me, Virgil just has to be stronger. He's almost got this thing, and we all love Virgil van Dijk, of course we do, and he's been absolutely exceptional all season long and before that as well. But it is almost how dare you touch me? He's got this thing nobody can touch me, and if they do, it's definitely going to be a free kick. That isn't always the case. Some strikers just have a go, and Muniz is one of them. He's he puts himself about, and he gets the better of him, and Van Dijk has this, like I say, no, nobody can come anywhere near me. It's just not possible, and people will, and they'll capitalise on it.
And I think it was a general sense. I think we've seen in the derby a little bit as well, and definitely laid bare more across the sides in that spell at the back end of the first half of a bunch of lads going, don't these pricks know we're the champions here? Everyone's saying we've won the league. Can you just not? What do you do? What's the point? What's the point of you trying this hard against us? Just let us go for it. And I do think Verge went too far the other way in the derby, and that contributed to him struggling in the first half. I think he was so pumped up. He was going, I'm going to give it a big load, whereas I did wonder a bit with the Muniz one, you're right, where it's just what are you doing? Just let me head it.
He almost has a look of disdain at people when they try it, don't they? Often not. But guess what? If they try it and they come off, then we all know it looks a bit stupid. You know what I mean? I don't think it was a foul for what it's worth. I think he's got to be much, much stronger, like I say.
Yeah, definitely. I asked the question. Anyone want to throw any names? Who came out of the first half in credit from the Liverpool side? Anyone?
Possibly McAllister, just for a few moments. Yeah,
that'd be it.
Yeah. I mean, I put Gakpo in there.
Maybe,
I thought he made it a difficult conversation around what we did with the substitutions. I thought Jota put himself about in the right kind of sort of way. And at the time, I thought Alexis McAllister fell into the same trap as Gravenberch and Szoboszlai, but on a rewatch, I actually agree. I thought he was excellent.
Gakpo frustrated me once or twice because it felt like he'd got the better of his man a couple of times and he never went. Yeah, and then he went again to try, and he just nothing came of it ultimately. But I think Gakpo was probably the pick of the front three, I'd say, but none of them were particularly outstanding.
I thought again, it depends on whether you think it's Curtis's fault for the first goal or not, which I don't. But I thought he was all right at right back as well. But by and large, it was not great. Mountain to climb in the second. Slot gave it 10 minutes and then started to make changes. One thing I will say, Steve, gung ho Liverpool are loads of fun. And maybe we'll dive into that in part 2. But yeah, the game state means that we are chasing the game and they're not. So it's much more the kind of game where you can get away with being more attacking. But yeah, Diaz just wants it. He wants it so much. McAllister wants it so much. Elliott wants it so much. And the more of these players that we put on the pitch, Curtis Jones put in midfield, wants it. The more of these players we got on the pitch, lo and behold, we created a performance more fitting for a team that's fighting to win a title as opposed to one that looks like it's already won it.
But get into that stage, last for 10, 15 minutes of the Carabao Cup finals the same, where you throw caution to the wind and your formation goes out the window and you end up playing 6 lads up top, all there and thereabouts, is the absolute opposite of what Arne Slot wants. And he'll be having sleepless nights over stuff like that because it all has to be under control, doesn't it? And it's very much not. And it's kind of heavy metal football again, isn't it? And it's going back to what we did so well under Jurgen, and these lads have still got Jurgen in their system, and it'll take a long time for that to change. And sometimes you have to do it, and sometimes you should do it. And you're right, we're loads of fun to watch, and we create opportunities and things get better. And on another day, we actually come away with 3 points, and you'd be sitting there going, how did we do that? Because, aside from that spell when we really pushed in the second half, Fulham would tell you they were good value for the result.
Yeah.
But we can't get to those stages, and that's one of the tasks of next season, isn't it? By at 75 minutes, 60 minutes, 65 minutes, you shouldn't be that far behind the game where your tactics goes out the window.
It needed that goal in the first 15 minutes, that half, to give yourself something to chase. And unfortunately, it went from we could still win this to maybe we could draw this to shit. We fucked it. And the game, the sort of sand in the hourglass, sort of dripping away, didn't help us in that regard. It's worth having a conversation a bit more about some of the players, though. We'll start with the guy, Andy, who was talking about being best in the first half. Alexis McAllister, I just thought he was outstanding. Again, better than I remembered in the first half, but in the second half, whenever we're talking about knackeredness, mental and physical fatigue, he dug deep and found levels again in his performance. I thought he was great.
It's the incisive play in the tight areas. We mentioned before about how there were white shirts everywhere, and it's very, very difficult, especially from a Gravenberch picking up the ball, maybe from the back four, trying to turn into play, or pop it off. Szoboszlai, we mentioned, struggled. McAllister didn't struggle at that point, and this is a guy who is physically quite small in stature, so it's not as if he can sort of, the way Curtis Jones is very good at doing, taking it in, holding a couple of players off. Obviously Jones gets criticised for not releasing it quick enough, but yesterday I thought it was beneficial to us. McAllister can't really do that to the same extent, so he does need to sort of wriggle away or find a little bit of a yard of space or pop it off, and he did so very, very well. I think at times over the last couple of weeks, McAllister has struggled a little bit when he's been put under pressure in midfield. He has panicked a little bit. Maybe his passing's just been slightly off. But yesterday definitely wasn't one of those days. I thought he was excellent. And I think across the course of the season, actually, I suppose there's an argument with Gravenberch, but I actually think he's been our most consistent midfielder.
I think it's fair. I think the Gravenberch thing, I can't really remember, Dan, the last time I thought that's a really good Ryan Gravenberch performance. And it's telling that I did sat the social a few weeks ago before the League Cup final, and it was like talking about players in current form, and I did think about Gravenberch. Oh shit, because if this happens, if it had been a week later or 2 weeks later, I might be in a little bit of trouble here, whereas there's still enough residual acceptance of how great he's been this season that the wider footballing community isn't on to the fact that he's been a bit crap for a bit. But yeah, I agree. I think McAllister's found a level throughout the campaign.
Yeah, McAllister's always been sort of Mr. Consistent in that midfield for me. I don't think he ever really dips below sort of like a 7 out of 10 performance. Maybe doesn't quite reach the height of like a 9.5 and up, although yesterday the goal had him on for that at one point. But no, I think that's a fair assessment really, because Gravenberch was absolutely outstanding the start of the season. Maybe that because it was a bit of a surprise to us. Nobody really anticipated or expected we see the level that we did, certainly not in that new, seemingly unfamiliar position. But yeah, I don't know if he's feeling the effects of just the sheer amount of football he's played or what it is, but we haven't seen him hit anywhere near the sort of heights again recently for me. I think there have been 1 or 2 performances in isolation that you think, okay, that's more like a Ryan Gravenberch performance. But yeah, not anything sort of like it, really.
Do we think he's been figured out, or is it a combination of that
yesterday.
Plus tiredness, fatigue, etc., etc.?
I think it's a combination of the two. I had exactly that conversation on one of the post-match shows yesterday, funnily enough. And yeah, I was trying to work out, because it was such a surprise to us, which therefore means it was a surprise to the rest of the Premier League, just what he was capable of in that role. And he plays it in such a different way as well. It's not your archetypal Fabinho, Makelele, etc. number 6. He's a footballer in there, isn't he? He wants to get it down and play, and he turns away from trouble like nobody ever really seen before in that role. So I think it is a little bit of that, but also I can't shy away from the minutes, because last season in that team a little bit in a different position, it's fair to say as well, but never really got ahead of steam up, never really got going. Been a bit part player. The season before was a write-off at Bayern Munich. We're 3 seasons away from him having anything like proper footy, and he's in the top 3 of minutes this season for Liverpool so far.
He has played the 3rd most minutes of any Liverpool player this season, behind Van Dijk and Mohamed Salah.
It's a big jump to make that. Like, he's still he's 22, maybe 23 now. Yeah, listen, he's been, again, excellent. He's one of the key reasons we're going to win the Premier League. Let's have it right. But that's not to say that maybe we could have handled him or used him differently had we had more players, to Andy's point, that Slot trusted to drop into certain situations.
I just can't remember the last time that we played the ball to him and he did that. Drop the shoulder, and then he's past the man, and the midfield opens up in front of him. And I think this goes back to this idea of, I think we've struggled to control games. So he's playing within himself. He's just playing. He's knocking it back to the fence. He's doing all the stuff that people used to criticise Jordan Henderson for all the time and Wijnaldum for. And that's fine. Look, he's not being so bad that he's a liability in our midfield. But it's whether that thing of, are people anticipating that better? Where I come back and people might go, and that can be fine, and you can work on that. Thiago never got figured out doing that, and Thiago had that sort of skill set. It's, Lallana had that within him as well, and I think Gravenberch, maybe he'll benefit from a bit more coaching time, because if it's been figured out in his position, then that's something that the manager needs to work on him, and where's he receiving the ball and his anticipation. But it feels a bit like physical and mental bluntness combined with he's more of a known entity, and people do know if you stop Gravenberch, then you're going to influence how Liverpool play out of the midfield. But it's an interesting one.
I think how and when you give him the ball is key to that, and without a right back who understands what his position is at the base of that midfield. You said it before, we did in the League Cup final, it was just like Kelleher slamming the ball into their half and their centre-backs picking it off. It's a little bit like that at times again yesterday. He must be frustrated at the moment because there's not anybody on the pitch in his proximity that's allowing him to have the ball in a time and a place when he can use it and where he's going to hurt people. He spends a lot of time watching the game at the moment because we're not coherent, we're not doing what we want to do because we've lost the balance. The balance has gone a little bit. It's like one of them things, you play Championship Manager and it comes up and it says the chairman is delighted with your league position but he's a little bit worried about your current form. I guess we're kind of in that realm at the moment. And I think he's because he can't influence the game, because we're not giving him the ball where he can, I think he's spending a lot of time watching it.
Well, it's a conundrum. We have this all the time. Arsenal have got this with Saka, and we've had it with Trent and Salah and all of our really good players. And this goes back to the summer thing. It's difficult because he's been excellent, and he's that age where he can play that volume of minutes. But yeah, he needs rotation. But unfortunately, we've decided Endo's not the one. And then your alternative is possibly Curtis Jones, but Curtis Jones is playing right back for you. Yeah. We had to do that was a mad shuffle. The Gravenberch goes to centre half, that was the solution to our problem was a little bit of a funny one, to be honest. But yeah,
I think there's a little bit of a fear factor lacking in our front line at the minute as well, which doesn't help Gravenberch, because you do need a little bit of space to operate and do those things that the sort of trademark Gravenberch turn, similar to the Thiago one that we saw all the time this season. Whereas if teams are like, right, well, the ball's not going to be knocked over the top here. We're playing on the halfway line. Salah's not quite up to what he was. Jota's not running in behind. Gakpo not quite fit. Diaz again. When was the last time sort of Diaz burst past a man and was explosive? So if teams know they can play on the halfway line, whereas maybe earlier this season it was a case of, right, we need to watch because we may well need two men on Salah if the ball goes out there.
Yeah.
So we need to hold back a little bit. Whereas now he's just got 4 or 5 men around him. It's very difficult for him to do what he wants to do with 4 or 5 men around him. And until we solve that problem of pushing teams back a little bit more, I can't see Gravenberch having these sort of 9 out of 10 performances that he was having earlier in the season.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Dan Diaz, great, absolutely great. The perpetual thing with him is going to be, does he have enough output? But right now, his output is really helping us to sort of drag along. Actually, his overall attitude towards the game, that fight, I think, inspires it in other players around him as well. Because I've been a little critical of describing Gakpo as being a bit like a guy who just arrives in the right place and he'll stick it in the back of the net. He was doing some really great winger stuff in that first half, dropping the shoulder, twisting his man inside and out, similar to what Diaz would do. But I don't know what it is. There's something about Diaz that makes you go, oh, he gets your blood pumping. And I do think that really, right now, I think the team needs loads of that.
No, I agree absolutely, yeah, because I think there are a few that run on empty, whether it be physically or mentally. So I think having somebody with his just bloody mindedness and is up for the fight is, an absolute gift. And he showed all of that. And I've always admired Luis Diaz for that. There was the game Darwin Núñez got sent off against Crystal Palace, actually at home, and he was the one that went, I'm not losing this, and he scores, and he just has that real that real sort of drive and determination to not let it happen on his watch, really. And I think you need a lot of that, and he brings it in bucket loads. And yesterday was another example of it. And when he's got space to operate in, there's no doubt he's a better player, and he can just drive at people. He must be a nightmare for full-backs. I do agree with Andy's point and yours, where I feel like there's still more he's capable of, because he can beat a man, he can make a man look stupid, and he can get past him and then deliver something. But he does frustrate me more often than not with his inability to do that. But in the same token, you're absolutely spot on. Out of the front 4 or 5, if you include Darwin, right now it's hard to argue that he looks like the most likely to make something happen.
3 assists and a goal in his last 4 Premier League appearances for Diaz. That's the kind of thing that you want to be looking at from that, because my argument with him has been, Steve, I think he's the absolute perfect 4th choice player for that front 3, because he can play at every one of the positions, but he might not quite be at elite numbers level to be, because I think you need to be 20 goals if you want to play wide, and you need to be 30 if you want to play if you want to really significantly upgrade on what we're doing through the middle. But right now, a bit like this time last year, happened exactly the same. Salah fell off a cliff, and Diaz was the only one who seemed like that Merseyside derby. He was like the only one who seemingly kind of still wanted it. But we were reliant on a guy who's not a 25 goal a season forward to be our main guy, and that becomes a problem in and of itself. But where we're at now, just need to get as many lads on the pitch who just desperately want it.
And if you look back at history of all the title winning sides, they have one person who kind of stands up in the last 6 or 7 games and says, I'll carry the fight and help get you over the line, and it looks like it might be him. And you referenced it a couple of weeks ago, his willingness to win the ball back in our box as well, and in and around our area, and then break, and then keep going and pen teams back. He's a really good outball and took his goal really well as well. He might be a bit much to say, might be the catalyst that gets us over the line, but he's more than doing his fair share right now.
Yeah, I agree. I want to do more on Elliott in part 2, probably, so I won't pick on him now, or pick him out too much now, but even though he deserves it, I thought Elliott was brilliant again. So I will do Conor Bradley, and just Andy, great to have him back. And it goes back to those things where, lo and behold, when you put a right back who knows how to play right back in a team, then we play better. And it was because of all the talk around Trent. I think there's been a lot of don't worry, we'll be fine because we've got Bradley. But equally, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you've got what are we doing, putting too much stock in a young lad like that? And then he comes in and he plays like that. You're like, oh, if he can just stay fit for the rest of the season, I think we'll all feel loads better around the whole situation, because he's fucking brilliant.
He is, yeah. There's a theory on the injuries with him that actually when Liverpool signed him, one of the things that apparently Liverpool looked for when they sign young players is basically when they stop growing. And they said he would stop growing at 22, which is actually very late. And people have made comparisons to Gerrard's injury record at this point of his career, where Gerrard picked up a lot of niggly little injuries. So hopefully this isn't the case of Bradley's just going to be an injury-prone player. Hopefully it's just a sort of growing thing, and he's going to come in and be fine. And obviously it's now 1 game a week until the end of the season, which should benefit him from a sort of muscle recovery point of view. I think yesterday, and I will laud the exploits of Conor Bradley, and he's got so much quality. I think just what we needed was that little bit burst of energy.
Yes.
Never mind what he did on the ball, and he did so many great things on the ball, but the little burst of energy into midfield where he took the ball, just that sharp turn past the Fulham midfielders who weren't able to catch up with him. I think that really helped us. And I think the fact, like I mentioned earlier, but he actually pegged Fulham back, because Conor Bradley's the quickest player on the pitch there for Liverpool when he comes on. Whether Salah, a fully sort of fit Mo Salah, around to go to the start of the season a bit quicker, at that point in time, Conor Bradley's the quickest player on the pitch. Yeah. And he plays almost like a right winger at times. And that meant Fulham actually realised, hang on a second, if there's a ball over the top here to Conor Bradley, there's too much space in behind us. They then pushed back 10 yards. And that's when you started to see McAllister and the likes of Diaz getting a lot more joy. So just from a tactical point of view, his energy and his pace alone, never mind what he did on the ball, was just exactly what we needed at that time.
That right-hand side then, with him and Elliott and Salah, Dan, it meant Salah could get a little bit more back into the game again. Elliott had people to pass to, and like Conor Bradley actually just scaring the life out of people by running at pace, which at that time of the game was in such short supply. It's in short supply in our squad in general, but definitely added something.
Oh, massively so. You're much needed as well. It gave Fulham something to think about, as Andy alludes to there, really, because they'd got our number pretty much, certainly over that side. There was no real threat being posed whatsoever, in part due to a lack of quality and a lack of finesse on the ball, but also a lack of legs over there as well. And yeah, I think Harvey Elliott and Conor Bradley in unison added that in bucket loads, and they both take up really interesting spaces as well. They're quite brave in the decision making and what they want to do. Conor Bradley, obviously, for the goal, goes very central. Something he's made a little bit of a habit of. I've seen him do that once or twice, actually really intelligently picks his moments, picks and chooses when to go in there. And I'm a huge Conor Bradley fan. The injuries have been the injuries, but I still hold out hope based on what he did at Bolton, because he was even younger then and he played a 50-game season and he was player of the season down there. So there is a lot in me that is sort of positive about what he's capable of. But that remains to be seen, of course. But based on the evidence of yesterday, and it allowed Mo Salah to be more Mo Salah, because they nullified any threat that he posed completely over there. But just giving Harvey Elliott to deal with, who takes up really interesting pockets and are full of energy, full of running, desperate to turn the game around, Conor Bradley, was an absolute blessing.
It's that thing about, I've heard a lot of this in analysis of him, people going, he's injury prone, and then full stop, and it really winds me up, because I think we do this too much, and we've particularly done this a lot because we've had injury prone players, and listen, it could be Martin Kelly 2.0 in that regard, when you're all pace and running, if you get hamstring issues, and something they can be hard to come back from. But what Andy's saying, I agree that is the point. I think it's growing pains predominantly with him, and I'm hopeful that that's something they'll overcome, and you'll get a much more solid person off the back of it under Slot, and he should be able to be managed better under this manager, because we've definitely seen evidence of that. So I'm not as keen to write him off as injury prone. He's had injuries, absolutely, but it's too soon in his physical development to label him injury. This is not Joel Matip, who you've got a bank of an entire career to point at that.
What he's shown is in Real Madrid game, the challenge on Mbappe, which has been a standout moment for him in the season, and what he showed as he can do yesterday. Listen, life without Trent is going to be very difficult. If we get that version of Conor Bradley and he's fit for most of the season, he makes life a little bit easier for us all.
Yeah, 100%. We had a few comments in Super Chats I just want to quickly get through before the break. Martin Lawrence, welcome to Wonder Kids here on YouTube memberships. Thank you so much. Josh Owen says, Sobo isn't a 10. No creativity. Switch with Maka. I mean, McAllister basically did that himself during the game. Again, it's hard to tell, isn't it, Dan, because of this whole what he does off the ball and the energy and the physicality that he brings. But I think if you were saying what a 10 looks like, he's more like, I want to see him play it like Gerrard played it with Torres. And that is to say, pick passes out when it's there for you, but also get in beyond, get in the box, score some more goals. I think Curtis Jones would play it like that. McAllister tries, because McAllister gets into the box all the time. McAllister scores headers inside the 18-yard box. Let's be honest, Szoboszlai should be scoring because he's got a greater height advantage in that regard. But he actually kind of really does neither. I don't really see him use his physicality to stretch teams in that way, and he certainly doesn't appear to be the kind of guy who's going to pick a cute pass, out of nowhere.
No, it doesn't look like he's got the guile for it, does it? And in the same breath, it doesn't like he's got that sort of seemingly the ability to strike from range and to have a go has evaporated as well, and he's not also getting into the box. And when he has done that this season, certainly when it comes to sort of headed chances, it feels like he's fluffed his lines once or twice. I don't think he's great in the air really for somebody who is 6'1", 6'2". But listen, the argument on McAllister I think is a fair one. It's interesting because Szoboszlai looks like he does have everything it takes to play that different role and do that swap, but we haven't seen it, so I'm not quite convinced by that. Whereas I know factually McAllister does that role, he does it brilliantly. But I do wonder what just putting McAllister in that 10 would do, because it feels like he's more suited to it for what we need.
Yeah, definitely.
You'd lose the press and the leading of the press, wouldn't you, with Szoboszlai if you took him out of that? I suppose.
Yeah, perhaps, but you do it a different way.
Possibly. Yeah.
I think what you'd lose moreover, actually, for me, is that balance and just the calmness and the ability to just retain possession from McAllister in the position that he plays personally. I'm not sure Szoboszlai's quite got that going. And he's also, McAllister, the work rate he gets through in that bit of grit and that bit of gnarl that he puts in, I think you'd miss that as well.
If you took him out, you'd take him out to put him in place of Szoboszlai. You then take Szoboszlai out and replace him with Jones.
Exactly, yeah.
Because Jones will give you that calmness, the lad just doesn't give the ball away. It's ridiculous when he's under pressure. And then you need that.
Absolutely, it's only in that role.
ARC or ARQ says a bad result. Would rather win the league with 2 losses than a potential unbeaten season, but lost to Forest. Still hungover from the last time we lost one. It was not. I didn't say it on a show last night. I think I might have said it to Ste. And he's like, well, there's more misery to be thought about rather than trying to put a mad glass half full spin on it. But this is one of those pure. I always do this when I reach for positives when things are negative, because it's just how I'm wired. But I would rather just win a treble. You know what I mean? Win a treble, Liverpool, and then worry about what you're doing in the summer and beyond. But I have got this little thing where, when we talked about the other day, when Rafa wins the league, the European Cup in his first season, he set an impossible bar for himself to follow. And if you're going to win the league, it actually might service us better to have some doubts over how good this team is, because it gives you a ceiling to beat next year. I'm well aware how reachy this sounds, but I agree. A team that only gets one defeat, that's a fucking shitload of pressure that potentially a rebuilt side doesn't need next season, provided we get across the line, of course. Last one before the break. MDM 1207 says, only issue with Slot is poor squad use, needs work. Right, that is the topic behind part 2, whether we agree or disagree with that, and things that maybe are to be improved by the manager. Stay tuned after these short messages. Dublin, Belfast, Cork, the Redmen TV are coming to your town. The mighty Reds, Arne Slot Liverpool, are flying high in the Premier League, and we are coming up on our 15th anniversary. What better way to celebrate 2 amazing things than to head on a tour of Ireland? Yes, me, Chris and Steve will be bringing our usual brand of hijinks, cartwheels, foul language, slagging off other football clubs that we don't like very much, and generally loving Liverpool Football Club. This time we've got Mark Kenny with us, bringing the brilliant Liverpool tunes as well. Come and join us Wednesday the 23rd. We're in Dublin in the Ambassadors Theatre, our biggest ever live show venue. Thursday, we are back at the Limelight in Belfast, arguably our greatest ever live show last year. Can we recreate it again? Yes, we can. Get down there to see us if you're in Belfast. And for the very, very first time in Redmen history, Cork on the Friday. It's going to be a banger. The high bar will have been set by Dublin and Belfast. Can Cork surpass it? The only way to find out and to help it be a thing is to come down and see us. Tickets are available right now for the Dublin and Belfast gigs. Get your tickets at ticketmaster.ie, and Cork, you can get your tickets at eventbrite.ie. Come and join us. It's going to be the best time in the world with us and you, partying like only Liverpool fans can. Join us.
The Redmen. We are the Redmen.
Hi, welcome back. So it came up in conversation today that there's a chance that me, Chris and Steve will be on stage in Dublin when Liverpool win the league, because Arsenal play Crystal Palace that night. It's been moved. If Palace win that game and things go in our way, that could be the one. So, you know, just on the off chance, I mean, what else are you going to be doing, Dublin? You sit around, watch it on the telly or whatever? No, come and be in a room with hundreds and hundreds of other Liverpool fans having a big old sing and a party. Just in case. So yeah, tickets to Dublin and Belfast are available on ticketmaster.ie, and our Cork gig is on Eventbrite. So come and join us for those if you're over on the Emerald Isle. Right, the season strategy, gents, following on from the super chat and also the fact that I wrote this morning. I'm going to say this. Dan, I'll start with you. Let's be clear. Liverpool have romped to a lead, and a seemingly insurmountable lead at the top of the Premier League, because of every single decision that has and has not been taken up until this point. You could make a case to the cows come home that we could have been done differently, but it is unprovable. All we know is that what Liverpool have done has got them here. They are on the dance floor. They are in the title race, and right now no one else is. However, I thought Chris Walsh tweeted something on the lines of saying, like, it's shocking how many of these lads who are going to win the league that I'm done with, kind of thing. Yeah. And there is a little bit of a sense of fear, anxiety and frustration around this. We've just had a lot of conversation around mental and physical fatigue. So I guess the question is, does Slot need to mix things up now for the rest of the campaign, or should he be sticking to his guns?
I'm not sure he needs to do it for the rest of the campaign. I think that ship might have sailed. I think I concur with everything you just said there, really. But I think it is, you know, it's ours now. We're going to win the Premier League. Like, I think we'll do that, sticking to what Slot's done, sort of the tried and tested sort of plans that have got us here and the strategies that have got us here. So I don't think he needs to make any sort of changes at this point. I think, listen, once it is mathematically ours and, you know, we can celebrate in style, then we might see, we were speaking before we went live about some people who might need some appearances here and there. He might do some things then, but even then, you know, what he's done up until this point hasn't exactly given us much evidence of that. But no, I don't think that is the case personally. It's interesting you touched on it there. Like, it does feel as though whilst we are, you know, coasting, marching towards our 20th league title, there is a lot of conversations around who should and shouldn't be here beyond the summer, and some of them are sort of excessive in terms of like get rid of 7 or 8. Some of them are more feasible in terms of like 4 or 5 might be out the door as well. I think there's a load of intriguing conversations around that, but what I definitely think to be true, I've been peddling this for a while, is the manager can get better next season, and how he manages the squad. The squad can certainly get better as well, and sort of the intricacies around what we're doing on the pitch can improve as well, which I think is a really positive as well. I've made this point a few times on shows recently. When I say, you know, we're a very, very good side that's going to win the Premier League, that's great, but there's loads of room for improvement. It always sounds negative, but it's not supposed to be. It's supposed to be saying we're not the finished article. Watch what comes next.
We could be having this conversation from 5th or 4th. You know, 4th, you know, whatever, you know, where you're pretty safely ensconced in the Champions League places. But you go, oh, well, we could really improve. We're having conversations around potentially improving on being league title.
But I just don't know whether, again, sorry to come back, I don't know whether that happens between now and the end of the campaign, personally.
One thing that's interesting on it, though, Andy, is we had this conversation in the summer about what are we doing transfer strategy wise, and the general sense of it means he gets to run the full rule over all of the players. One of the comparisons I made with someone Elliott on post-match content was to Danny Murphy and players like that, when Rafa just came in and went, there's a saleable asset, I'll get good money for him. Yeah, he'd be a good player, but one thing we know, I think we're starting to get a real definitive idea on who the manager really, really, really likes, and who he's on the fence with and who he's having none of. So there's probably less likely to be a situation where if a player does not get it, if someone's not playing now at all, even if we win the league, if you're not getting minutes, there's basically nothing down for you. But at least we'll know definitively that that's the manager's decision, nothing else.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of those players, it's a case of you might as well get them off the wage bill. Chiesa is the obvious one. I've quite liked him when he's come on. I think he has a bit of an impact yesterday. I don't think he's,
we will not hear a bad word spoken about Federico Chiesa.
You will not.
We.
I think the only thing is there's rumours that he's on 150 grand a week, because obviously we signed him on the cheap, but the reason we were able to get him is because we offered him quite big money. Now he will be one of the higher earners in that squad. There's rumours coming out this morning about Konaté's only on 80 grand. He's looking 200. You've got Chiesa there on 150 and you're just not using him, then he has to go. There's going to have to be some difficult conversations, like I said earlier, about the likes of Elliott, because in a game like this, if he's going for a leggy, out of form Szoboszlai over Harvey Elliott, then if that's his decision, he's going to stick with that. Then there has to be a conversation with him as well.
This week we jump in on the strategy side of things, because I think it's mad that Elliott's not played more. I really do. I think he's contributed brilliantly whenever he's been given the opportunity. I think that of Chiesa, but at this point I can't even be arsed to have that conversation. He clearly is not having Chiesa at all. But the Elliott thing, the problem we've got, Steve, is if he's not starting him away at Fulham, where you've had a midweek game where everyone's fucking knackered, he's not going to start. He's not going to start him at the weekend against West Ham when he's had a full week to let Szoboszlai train, is he?
No, and it happens length and breadth of football. Managers come in and they assess their squad and they go, I've seen training this week and that broke down, and they broke the Team A against Team B, different coloured bibs. They just ran past Harvey like he wasn't there, and I can't have that on a Saturday in the Premier League. It's horses for courses, different things that people do. If you're looking for a 10 in a squad, well, then potentially you've got one in Harvey, because all the things that we speak well of him, and the fact that he gets the ball out of his feet, he looks up, he's forward thinking, he's creative, he tries things, that's great. And in another side in the Premier League, he will flourish. In terms of the midfield, he has this insistence on playing Szoboszlai almost as a forward. I'm not sure you can ask Harvey to do that. But you then also can't have him to go and be an orthodox number 8 and shore up your midfield from a physical point of view. So he's kind of stuck between those two positions, and it makes it really, really difficult. He's a wonderful, wonderful footballer, and if he went and played for someone like, I don't know, Brentford or even someone like a Spurs, the capability for him to bring all of his attributes to the table and shine and show everybody what he's got would work. The problem is, and there's a big thing going on in football at the moment, because Gary Neville's called football boring. Because football's become systemic, and football has become systemic, and we're systemic, and our system says you can't play a diminutive guy that can't pick up your transition and can't physically compete week in, week out in the Premier League, and that's the manager's decision, and that's just something as a fan base and as football in general we have to accept, that he will look at that squad and go, that one's for me, that one's not for me, that one's not for me. It comes down to the saleable asset comment you made before. There'll be £40 million on the table for a player like that if you choose that guy doesn't fit in with what you want to do.
Yeah, it's just so, the Elliott stuff I find baffling. I did this on the deep dive with Josh last week when we were talking about, on the Redmen Plus version, about how we replace Salah in the aggregate. Elliott, for me, could be a real answer towards that. And I don't mean play Elliott instead of Mo Salah on the right wing. I mean that if in a world where Salah doesn't play for you anymore, you've got to replace goals and assists, then Elliott scores goals and gets assists. And, and perhaps, it's hard to tell, because I think he's got a grand total of like 7 90s this season. So that is too small a sample range. But in terms of his per 90s, the only players who've got better per 90 stats in terms of goals are Cody Gakpo and Mo Salah, and in terms of assists, Mo Salah of the senior players is the only one who's better than Harvey Elliott in terms of that creativity. And again, very small sample range, but it might be one of the. This is where I hope there's a clear picture of what they're doing in the transfer market, because I do think if you put a centre forward in that team, someone who wants to score goals for you and is designed to score goals, I think it's an awkward fit for Szoboszlai all of a sudden, because I don't think you need his what he does in behind that, perhaps.
Yeah.
And maybe someone who just pulls the strings in Elliott could be the answer. And that's why, I don't know, this happens time and time again, and it's the frustrating thing when managers change, is that you can see a pathway for a certain footballer, and a new manager comes in and that just completely changes again. Danny Murphy could have been a Liverpool player for the next 10 years or whatever. It was not necessarily a world beater, but he could well have just been in that squad. But managers come in and want to do their own things, and it would be a shame that he's got so much quality, someone like Elliott, that he doesn't get to fulfil that at Liverpool.
Yeah, when we appointed Arne Slot and I did my sort of research into how he plays in his formation, I actually thought this is really going to suit Harvey Elliott. I thought, like, you know, that idea of the number 10, he was a bit of a lost man in the Jurgen formation, the 4-3-3. Was he the right hand side of midfield, sort of pushing on that more attacking role that Henderson used to occupy? Can he be a replacement for Salah? But he doesn't really have that burst and pace over sort of 30-40 yards, so that becomes difficult there. He was a bit lost in the Jurgen team, while Jurgen clearly rated him as a footballer, wanted to keep him around, wanted to give him minutes.
He was picking him in big games.
Yeah.
He was picking him in the biggest games.
And one of his last regrets, though, was the fact he didn't pick him enough.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have to be spot on, yeah.
Do we think that just Arne Slot just loves big old boys?
Well,
There's definitely an element to that.
This is what I was going to say. I think there's an issue when you've got McAllister already in the team in that midfield.
And Jota.
And Jota, but especially just from a midfield point of view, if you've McAllister and Elliott as two of your three midfielders, I know Elliott's obviously a bit more advanced in a different role, then it becomes very difficult, especially in a game like yesterday. You mentioned Sander Berge earlier. I never realised how big he was. Massive lad.
Sasa Lukic alongside him, similar.
Lukic, but even like Alex Iwobi's a quick, tricky winger, but he's a big lad as well. The lad Muniz puts himself about. Just sometimes in these games, as great of a league as it is and as great of a product as it is, it does sometimes come down to massive lads. It becomes very difficult, especially when, like I've said it a million times, sound like a broken record, they're right on top of you. If they're, you know, set up in a way where they can get straight to your players without sort of you being able to leg them around and pop it off like we couldn't do yesterday, it becomes very difficult. And I think that's something that Minamino suffered from. Didn't Jurgen say he couldn't play him because of the average height of the team from defensive set pieces?
Paul Tompkins has made a big point of this over the years about when we had bad seasons, it was because of we conceded more from set pieces because you got more small lads on the pitch. And look, that falls a little on deaf ears when we're then letting Alexis McAllister, Mark Dan Burn corners in the cup finals when there are bigger lads on the. Harvey Elliott wasn't starting that team, by the way, you know. But it is. I just wonder whether this is a consideration. I agree. You know, the Premier League's full of powerhouse grocks. Do we need a team of powerhouse grocks who also have got the skill on top?
So you look at it. Let's go down the conversation you just had, and Salah decides his future's elsewhere, and you kind of think of using Harvey in that position, and you're 20 minutes into a game, and you've been backs against the walls a little bit, and you give the ball to Van Dijk, and he looks up and he thinks far right corner, and then he thinks it's Harvey. I can't do it.
Yeah,
so straight away you've shut down one of your out balls. Mo's really, really strong, isn't he? We've all seen that, and okay, you don't get as much from him going backwards as you used to, but his numbers speak for themselves going forwards. We'd have to change our shape completely, I think, to accommodate Harvey on the right hand side. That would look more like a 4-4-1-1. Where you have someone in behind a front man, like you've said before, where you'd like to see Szoboszlai doing the Gerrard thing behind Torres, and I can see all the sense in trying that. But as it is, we're still really a 4-3-4, whatever you set the midfield up. We've still got three up top. Yeah. I don't think you can play Harvey on the right side of that three up top.
It's just frustrating because, again, if we're talking about a world where there's no Trent Alexander-Arnold, you've lost the creative outlet. You're going to have to replace that somewhere else in the pitch. And this comes back to it. Elliott answers problems. Now, he may create other ones, but that's where the summer's so interesting. And why I don't think Slot should be looking at things now, because he's got to win. He's got to get enough points to get the league title boxed. Yeah. But I just don't see that Elliott is having I don't think he's having a look at things. I think you need lads on the pitch. Diaz, Elliott, and Bradley will play anyway because he's all right back and fit. But again, even Chiesa, there's a conversation to be had in the next week or two, and I wonder whether we might, if we struggle against West Ham, there might become a little breaking point where afterwards he'll have to do this. I'm just wondering whether he might try to preempt these problems, because Dan, I'm not saying Chiesa should start over Salah forever.
Yeah.
But I don't think there's a problem with starting Chiesa and playing him for 60 minutes against West Ham, say, and then bringing Mo Salah on for half an hour at the end to mix things up. And the same with Elliott. And the same with, I don't know, whatever. Diaz doesn't fall into that because I think he's in rotation already. Putting some like really hungry lads who aren't jaded on the pitch will give us something, I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, but we saw the impetus it had yesterday and the impact. There's that added energy and that added ability to go the extra yard and to run that little bit harder and faster. That made the entire game of football change for me and look like we might actually get something out of it. So whilst I agree, nothing that Arne Slot has done up until this point suggests that he's going to do anything like what you just said there, and also try and have a conversation with Mo Salah about not starting a game of football between now and the end of the season. It was, you're right, yeah. But no, and he's coming off from the bench, wasn't he, as well, actually, yeah. So that would be an interesting there.
I'd be saying, Mo, I'm not going to pick yet, but if you can, I'm going to stand on this side of the training ground, and if you can get to me in X number of seconds, then I'll let you argue the case. And if you can't, you're on the bench this weekend.
I think the form of sort of the lads we've just mentioned there, those coming into that equation and those going out of it, probably warrants that to be a genuine conversation. But again, personally, yes, but from an Arne Slot point of view, I don't really see it. We have built up such a margin of error as well, whereby we'd be allowed to do that, but I just don't see it.
The manager can do what he wants because I think he's earned the right to do what he wants at this point, but I just do have that little thing in the back of my mind of, I think we can't know this because unfortunately football doesn't really exist in spreadsheets. They're trying the best to get as much of it into a spreadsheet as they humanly can, but I think it probably does boil a bit down to, is 60% of Mo Salah better than a fully fit Chiesa? And he's probably thinking, yeah. And actually, same with Szoboszlai and Elliott. But again, it just comes back for me. I think we've been really boring. I think we've lacked guile, we've lacked creativity. I think the work rate returned. I think we saw the work rate in the derby. I think the work rate, the desire to work hard, I think was there. But there was also something a little bit lacking from the weekend. Getting lads on who can just make things happen on a football pitch doesn't half change the perspective.
So it comes back to what we said earlier on before, because Arne Slot pushed back against the tiredness and the fatigue stuff, didn't he, post-match yesterday? He said, I don't see a tired team. The running stats don't tell us that we're tired. And that's fine. And I'm not sat here trying to disagree with the manager, of course not, because again, we are where we are in terms of the league table and destined for what we're about to do. But that might be a real, but I can also see as the fact that mentally, psychologically, they are jaded. The decision making's off. Andy Robertson is the prime example of this yesterday. Like, maybe in terms of the ability to run, that still exists, but there's something, they're not sharp. They're not at it at all.
Dan, we all watched Liverpool in 22-23.
Exactly, yeah.
And look, we're in the box seat. So, you know, this is not a critique of how he's gone about doing it, but it's funny because almost if we had more football to play, he'd have no choice, I think, at this point to play more of these lads. But it might kind of work against them in some regards. We've not got the need for those heroes that we had in previous years. There's no need. And also, that the injury resistance has become its own problem. Because if Szoboszlai had just missed 5 games, Elliott would have played 5 games and maybe he'd have scored a couple of goals and got a couple of assists, and you go, whoa. There you go, mate. You've come to the table. It just hasn't had those opportunities. This time last year, imagine if we had Chiesa in the squad this time last year. It might have helped us get over. We might have stayed more competitive. But Salah's just stayed fit all season, and basically is about to have the ultimate single campaign for any footballer ever in the Premier League. So I appreciate the complicated nature of
this.
And
the mad thing is, every week we take a step closer to a league title. It vindicates all of his decision making, and it makes him sit in his manager's office and go, yeah, I've got it right. And you can't really argue.
No. But in terms of learnings moving forwards, I do think there are genuine conversations to
I
be
think
had.
if he had 17 players in the squad that he could go to and feel confident rotating them, we would have seen that. I think he feels that if you took out 2 or 3 of the current players and put 2 or 3 of the squad players in there, the impact on the team is too big to try it.
I think Diaz, Gakpo's a good example that he'll rotate if he thinks there's not much between the players. And first half of the season with Tsimikas and Robertson,
I was going to mention that ship seems to have sailed itself. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but he definitely, colours to the mast on Robbo, rightly or wrongly, based on yesterday.
I think it's a bit like that moment in The Simpsons where Homer keeps averting nuclear disaster by doing eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and no one knows that's what he's doing at the end. It's like they go, I don't think he's quite the genius that we thought he was. Like Tsimikas has done something in training all the time. He's like, I've got these 2 great left backs. Honestly, they're like this. There's a piece of paper between them. Brilliant. Wow, look at the depth of quality. And then something's happened to Tsimikas and he's gone, ooh.
So he tried something early on in the season. He came out and said the reason why he's doing what he's doing and the reason why Tsimikas was playing was he wants to switch, and he wants to switch from fullbacks really early. And then the fullback that's free gets the ball out of his feet and moves it forward. So you could argue Tsimikas was better at that stage at doing that than Robertson was. Robertson was having a pre-season during the season and came back into some form of fitness sort of November, December time, and then he's had a wobble again. But the fact of the matter is that it comes down to who you trust.
Some players are not regular first team players because ultimately they're not good enough, and this is your problem with when you squad building. When you buy backups, they stay backups, and Tsimikas is forever a backup footballer, isn't he? You always want to make your first team players your next backups because they've got all the experience, they've got all the integration into the squad, etc., etc. Lovren, Lallana became great squad players for us, but squad players who from within. But there are some players who've got that potential to rise up. It's on him to figure out what's what.
Well, we had a 32-year-old Steve Nicol that ended up being a squad player, and depending on who you talk to throughout the ages, if you did a Liverpool 11, he's in the conversation. So there's nothing wrong with future iterations of Liverpool Football Club where Andy Robertson is that guy.
Yeah. And it just comes down to it, doesn't it? Again, we all like Endo, and we all like Elliott, and we all like Chiesa, I think. But yeah, again, it's he has to make those big decisions. So I'm appreciative of it. I don't have to agree with it, but yeah.
I think one of the things that's going to massively benefit us over these next sort of 7 games, this is why I'm pretty sure that we're not going to have a collapse and for there to be any sort of squeaky bum time going forward. I think 1 game a week now is exactly what we need. And we've had this conversation, this debate over the years about Liverpool, when they have a couple of weeks off, actually look worse when they come back, rhythm over rest and all this. I just think at this point, the way the squad are looking, and I appreciate the thing about the running stats, but I think this is a team who just needs to play once a week,
Absolutely.
have a full week on the training ground. If they're looking a bit leggy, give them the Tuesday off or individual bespoke plans for certain players, and just get everybody right and fully fit. And I am still confident that before the end of the season, I don't think we're going to sort of stumble over the line. I still think we're going to see some really good Liverpool performances now that we've just got that 1 a week to focus on.
Well recovered.
A bit of coaching time's not going to hurt. And actually, because if there is a degree to which we've been figured out a little bit by opposition teams, gives him a chance to work on stuff which he hasn't had. He said before the Fulham game, actually all through this season, training's been about dragging them off the floor and getting them ready for the next game, not let's get them in peak physical form and condition. The slight worry is, this is what the rhythm thing is, you don't have time to stop and think about how much it hurts. When you do,
that's true.
How do you then get yourself to go again? It's like that thing, if you exercise once a week, it fucking kills. But if you exercise every single day, it hurts, but actually the act of exercising gets you through the pain of it in some regard.
April's rest and recuperation time, isn't it? They're not out there doing newfound things where they're swinging them up and down the pitch.
Amazing party time.
I think there's 1 or 2 players in recent Liverpool history who benefit from that as well. I used to always think when James Milner wasn't necessarily first choice under Jurgen Klopp, but there were times where he would come in and he would play really well because he hadn't played in a couple of weeks, but all of a sudden his own good performances were then meaning he was playing all the time. And then after 3 weeks of James Milner playing Saturday, Tuesday, he looked leggy again. And that's why sort of going forward this summer, if we are to sell at least one of the left backs, which I think we will do, it has to be Tsimikas, because I still think you sign a left back, and if you need to drop Robertson in once every 2 weeks, or even just to play on the weekend while the other left back gets himself established, maybe playing Champions League games, Robertson can still reach that really high level of performance if he's not having to do it all the time.
100%. I agree with that a lot.
100%. 7 games to go. Look, just do it, Liverpool, will you? You fucking
Look at our misery.
pricks, just get it over the line. Just like, we love you, and it's so good, and I don't want to feel anything less than absolute elation with every single person associated with that football club. We just want to be able to celebrate. We don't need the anxiety. I don't need fans and other people telling me that it could be a big collapsing coming. I want that done. I want them to shut up and have other things to talk about. I don't want us to be the conversation in anything other than congratulations to Liverpool, 20-time winners of the English division. So, yes, do that, please. Before we go, there was some news that kind of came out before we came into the studio about Virgil van Dijk. James Pearce put a tweet out, but it looks like it's come from the press pack.
The mix zone post Fulham, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we have got the audio. How well this will work, we're about to find out.
We'll find out together, eh?
Yeah, let's do it. Lewis Steele has posted the audio of this. Virgil van Dijk speaking in the mix zone.
Progress, yeah.
So are you staying Liverpool next season?
I don't know, we'll see.
It comes out, Capitan. It's not nowhere near done.
What sort of progress is there? No. Listen, these are internal discussions, and we'll see.
Liverpool fans are quite
Good.
No, one more.
for you to stay.
Crying?
Yeah,
Well,
in a good way.
listen, I love the club and I love the fans, and today as well, they were there for us again, and unfortunately we couldn't reward them, but I want them to be there Sunday again and make the stadium an amazing venue, like always.
That's us.
So right, there was someone posted something in a group the other day that he was at some event in the
Yes.
And
Cadbury event?
Yeah, something about pre-season, wasn't it?
Yeah, he initially answered a question, and it was quite a positive answer. Less so than that, but still very positive. And then later on, he basically remarked that it's something about pre-season plans with Liverpool, so everyone was like on it like a rash, as you may well imagine.
Yeah,
so,
looking forward to what are you looking forward to? Looking forward to a pre-season with Slot, and it's like, hey,
Yeah, should have said that.
Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, coming out and saying that again, I just think Van Dijk's conducted himself brilliantly throughout all of this, Dan. You know, he's done it how I think it should be done. He said all along he wants to be a Liverpool player. He clearly loves the club. He loves being captain. He's really taken to the role. He sees this is a place where he can still fulfil ambitions that he's got in his career. But he's been respectful the whole way throughout it, and yeah, I just think it's played out there. And I've said for me, he's the one for me. Like I would give them all new contracts, but Virgil is the ultimate priority as far as I'm concerned anyway. But we've had a little inkling for a while. He did shut it down a few weeks ago. I think it was maybe in a post-match interview with Sky.
There was a lot of talk a few weeks ago that it was a done deal and it was signed, sealed, delivered, and he was sticking around. He played that down because clearly it wasn't the case. They were just rumours, murmurings, whatever. But to give him his due, like you touched upon there, I know factually every single post-match in the mix, and he's done that conversation. Now, it's never been as positive, it's never been as far down the line as what it was there. That is the most, hopeful update we've had thus far. But he's come out, as the captain does, but he's fronted up to it. He's never deviated from it. He's answered it. Every single week he's provided updates when asked. He's never shied away from it. So, yeah, I think he's conducted himself and handled it absolutely superbly well.
It's a point that what you're referring to there, and Paul Gorse talks about this, is he sees speaking to the local media as part of his captain's
duty,
responsibility. So he does, with the Echo, it's such hard craft being the Echo sports writer or Liverpool writer now compared to 10 years ago, or 20 or 30 years ago, when you used to be asked in with open arms, invited into the training, come and have a cup of tea and get free chats with everyone. Doesn't work like that. So it's good that he keeps those lines of dialogue open. But yeah, it's positive. It's there. I think we all need that. I think the Trent one looks like it's going to be what it's going to be. Still not 100% publicly confirmed, of course, but this is the kind of boost I think we could all do with right now. Just get it done, but in the short term, at least feeling like it's going to get done.
Yeah, and if of all three of them were to leave, that would probably be the one we would miss the most because of everything he brings to a squad environment, to a club environment. He came into the club and said, right, chill, I've got this. I'm going to show you all how to be super chilled out, play football the right way. We spoke about it recently. probably the best footballer in the club as well as the best centre back in the club and your leader. And when you put those three things together and you consider a future without him, it's terrifying. Absolutely, and he's an IQ player. So someone recently said you could put him alongside a speed merchant, and he could play with his IQ, and he could play till he was 38, 39. He's got everything that Thiago Silva had, and then some. So there's a very strong potential that he sits in alongside a slight change in the way that we play. This is why, the alleged figures for Konaté's salary. Konaté potentially is that guy that plays alongside him with all the pace and the power, and then you sort of regen sort of Andy Robbo, and you go with a right back full of beans, and then suddenly you've got a system where you can allow him to stay for years. And everything he brings, consummate pro. You just said it yourself. He speaks to the media really well. Doesn't put a foot out of place. He is pivotal to anything and everything we do in the short, medium, and you could argue a little bit long term as well.
Just very quickly, sorry, on the back of that, absolutely nailed it. But the stability, because we're having conversations around a little bit of a mini reset upheaval in the football club, possibly, a contract lad walking away for free, and changes left, right and centre, new left back potentially that side of him, new right back on the other side, who knows what the rest of the squad looks like. Having your captain stick around is fucking helpful in those circumstances, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens if that's the case, Andy. We've lived it through Gerrard, of when you become a wane in power but you're a superstar at the same time. There'll be a similar issue with Salah, but better to solve that problem with them at the football club than walking out in June 1st and going, shit. Exactly what Dan says there. You're putting potentially 3 new defenders into a back 4. You've already got to replace your most prolific attacker potentially in all that as well. Yeah, getting the skipper box gives everyone a lot of breathing space, even if he doesn't have 5 years left at the top of the game in him.
Yeah, I think he might well do have those 5 years left, but you're right, we don't know. This was always the one I was most confident about. I was never really in any doubt in my mind, for whatever reason, that Van Dijk wasn't going to sign. Obviously, it looks like Trent's going to go, and we're maybe 50-50 in Salah, maybe 60-40 in favour of him staying. But it's great news that Van Dijk is staying, because I think looking forward towards next season, we've already talked about some of the players there that we maybe think are going to go and are trusted. I think we need a little bit of a revamp of the forward line, and right now I'm thinking, well, that's exciting from a point of view of Premier League champions. If you then throw in losing your captain and your best player and potentially the best defender to ever, well, he is the best defender ever to play for Liverpool in my opinion. If you then throw in losing him, that excitement becomes trepidation then for me, and it becomes we could be going, yeah.
When you then ask how are Liverpool going to do the next season, Liverpool are installed as favourites because they're the reigning Premier League title. They're not, because it's not the same team. Because he's so good and so important, you can't lose. The only other player like that is Alisson at that sort of level. That if you lost Trent, Van Dijk, Salah, and Alisson type player, or any combination of them, it's not the same football team. I'm sorry. It goes back to the whole Chicago Bulls last dance type thing. You're lucky to have assembled players, because anything could have happened. Van Dijk might have ended his career with his knee injury. We might not have seen the same level player come back. So he's been fortunate that he's got what he's got that's enabled him to do it. You've got the best in class there. It means you can more accurately predict how good Liverpool are going to be, because they've still got boss players.
And I think Steve, you mentioned earlier in the show about how we play so much through the right back when Trent's playing, and that's where our creativity comes from. I think so much of how we defend and how many men we can throw forward is down to the fact we've got Van Dijk at the back. You think back to the derby where Beto gets a couple of chances because Van Dijk fluffs his line a couple of times. So the reason that he is 1v2, I suppose, with those two is because we trust the fullbacks to go up, we trust the midfield to go up and commit men to attacks because we've got Van Dijk at the back. And the very rare occasions, I don't really count the COVID season because that was just a mess, but there was a couple of times, I think Wolves last day of the season a couple of years ago before we played the Champions League final, where it's Konaté and Gomez play. I think Van Dijk has an injury or a suspension maybe. It's all over the place. And any time there's been any combination, which where Van Dijk hasn't been there, just because we're so used to that constant of Van Dijk, it has been a bit all over the place. And you would then have to take that transition next season and those teething problems. And it's just another thing that we don't need to think about.
We need to think about what his long-term replacement looks like. But I think he's an example of a player that's damn sight easier to find his replacement when you've got him there already. Because you've got a measuring stick. You can stand them against Van Dijk. Van Dijk can hand certain things of it. Listen, it might well be Quansah. You know, he's had a poor season by his standards from last year, but he's so young. He's got so much room for development. I think what Van Dijk was probably playing for Groningen at this age still. You know, so nowhere near the level that Quansah is at now. Van Dijk was at this stage of his own personal development. It could be Kanate. In years to come, could be moved over and something else happens, etc., etc. Or you clearly were interested in Lenny Yoro last summer. There could be someone else out there that you bring in this summer and he's learning the ropes. But yeah, all things so much more. I'm so much more confident about them. I'm sure the squad would be, and it puts them on a far greater footing if they keep the skipper around, and that looks positive, which is great. More to come from us. We're doing the Bias Football podcast after this. If you want to get half price of an entire year of Redmen Plus, head over there, choose a Captain yearly subscription and use the code POD for 50% off. Yes, an entire 12 months of incredible content, podcast and videos, and some big developments coming in terms of potentially a Redmen app. Don't want to say too much just now, but there's lots of very exciting things coming up, and I can't talk about them all in one go because it would be too much. Do go over to theredweekender.com. I have literally had, while we've been doing this, 70 messages in our WhatsApp group in terms of organising that stuff. Things are already moving behind the scenes. Get your details registered for tickets on that good stuff. And yeah, we're going to be talking a bit about Kevin De Bruyne. We might talk a bit about Gary Neville's assumption that footy's crap now because the team that he really watches are rubbish. Or maybe it's more to it than that, who knows. So come and join us over on redmenplus.com and we'll see you there.